The dome above him shimmered like liquid starlight, folding and unfolding in slow pulses as if the sky itself were breathing. The human stood alone in the center of the ceremonial platform, trying very hard not to fidget. The floor beneath his boots was translucent, revealing veins of soft blue energy running like illuminated rivers beneath his feet. Every few seconds the current flared, reminding him that this was not a stage. It was a living circuit connected to the nervous system of an empire. He adjusted the collar of his formal uniform and whispered to himself, "It's just a ritual, definitely not a cosmic marriage market with billions watching." The translation implant in his ear misinterpreted his murmur and broadcast it at diplomatic volume. A low ripple of telepathic chatter moved through the balconies. Excellent. A flawless start. Around him rose the royal court of the Zurith Dominion, their forms elegant and unnervingly composed. They looked almost human, tall, luminous, impossibly poised, but their long ears curved gracefully past their jaws, tapering like delicate spires. Those ears shifted constantly, tilting toward sounds and thoughts he could not hear. He had been warned that they were sensory organs tuned to emotional frequencies, which meant they could probably detect that his heart was trying to escape his ribcage. A harmonic tone resonated through the arena, not heard but felt, vibrating along his spine. The ceremonial interface awakened. Holographic sigils unfolded in the air, forming constellations of information around him. Lines of alien script spiraled outward, translating into a language his implant could process. "Human envoy," the voice of the High Chancellor echoed, smooth and layered as though several minds spoke at once. "You have been granted the honor of selection." The word lingered. One by one, figures stepped forward along the circular edge of the platform. Royal daughters, strategists, scientists. Each one carried herself with calculated serenity. Their skin held a faint opalescent glow, their eyes reflecting the shifting light of the dome. Their long ears angled forward in subtle curiosity as they studied him. A projection materialized beside the first candidate, listing achievements in cascading light. "Neural capacity exceeds imperial standard by 12%, the translation read. "Command aptitude verified, genetic stability optimal." She inclined her head with precise grace. He nodded back, unsure whether to bow, wave, or salute. He settled on something that resembled all three and looked like none. A faint flicker passed through several sets of elongated ears. He suspected that meant amusement. The next candidate stepped forward. Astrophysical engineer, architect of 3 orbital cities. Her projection rotated to display schematics of star harvesting arrays. She offered him a composed smile. He cleared his throat. "That's impressive. I once fixed a coffee machine without electrocuting myself." The silence that followed was heavy enough to register on the gravity sensors. Then, somewhere in the upper tiers, a delayed ripple of polite laughter traveled like a hesitant wave. Apparently humor required a firmware update. The ritual continued. Each woman was extraordinary in ways that made him feel increasingly like a particularly average mammal. Combat tactician, quantum linguist, diplomatic prodigy. The Empire was not offering companionship. It was offering strategic alliances wrapped in elegance. And above them all, seated upon a throne grown from crystalline alloy and living biometal, was the Queen. She had not moved since the ceremony began. Her presence was not loud, yet it bent the atmosphere around her. She looked almost human, yet more precise, as if reality had been fine-tuned in her shape. Her long ears were more pronounced than the others, sweeping gracefully downward before tapering to luminous tips. They were still now, angled slightly outward, listening. He had been instructed not to stare. He stared anyway. The Chancellor's voice resonated again. "Human envoy, you may approach the candidates. You may inquire, you may decide." Decide? He walked slowly along the circle, boots echoing faintly against the energized floor. As he passed each woman, her projection adjusted, recalculating compatibility metrics in real time. Numbers hovered in the air. Probability of diplomatic stability, high. Probability of genetic resonance, favorable. Probability of social harmony, statistically secure. He stopped before one candidate whose projection announced her expertise in xenobiology. She regarded him with calm interest. "Do you enjoy Earth cuisine?" he asked before his brain could intervene. A pause. Her long ears angled toward him, processing. "My metabolism can synthesize 47 variants of terrestrial protein structures," she replied evenly. "So that's a maybe on pizza." Another faint ripple traveled through the court. This time it was quicker. He continued walking, the weight of billions of unseen eyes pressing invisibly against his back. Somewhere beyond the dome, entire star systems were likely streaming this moment. The Empire's networks were quantum entangled. Distance meant nothing. His awkwardness was now interstellar. When he reached the center again, he felt the expectation coiling tight. He looked up. The Queen's gaze met his. The air seemed to thin. Even the energy currents beneath the floor dimmed slightly as though listening. Her face held no overt expression, yet something in her eyes suggested depth beyond protocol. Unlike the others, she had no projection hovering beside her. No statistics. No strategic summary. She was not presented as an option. The Chancellor spoke, tone carefully neutral. "Human envoy, state your choice." His mouth felt dry. He became acutely aware that his species was not known for cautious romantic decisions. He glanced at the circle of extraordinary women. Brilliant, capable, politically convenient. Then he looked back at the Queen. She remained still, her long ears subtly attuned, as if sensing the tremor in his thoughts. He exhaled slowly. "I choose," he swallowed, resisting the urge to ask if there was a refund policy. "I choose you." The word left him before doubt could intercept it. Silence. Not the polite silence of confusion, not the structured silence of protocol. A deeper one. The dome's shimmering membrane paused mid-pulse. The flowing currents beneath his feet flickered. Across the balconies, hundreds of elongated ears froze in perfect unison. The Queen did not move. Her long ears, luminous at the tips, went utterly still. For a heartbeat, he wondered if he had just triggered a planetary defense system. He offered a small, nervous smile. "In my defense," he added softly, "I've always had terrible timing." No laughter followed this time. The Queen's eyes did not leave his, and in that unbroken gaze something shifted, subtle, almost imperceptible, like the first crack forming in ice that had never known warmth. The silence did not shatter. It crystallized. For several suspended seconds, nothing in the arena moved. Then the telepathic network ignited. He could not hear the thoughts, but he saw them, faint filaments of violet light rippling between the balconies like a storm contained in glass. The long ears of the court angled sharply, twitching in synchronized bursts as silent arguments cascaded through shared neural channels. He lifted a hand slightly. "I'm guessing that wasn't option C." No one responded. The High Chancellor stepped forward, robes gliding over the energized floor. His elongated ears tilted back in precise symmetry. "Human envoy," he said carefully, "the sovereign is not a candidate." The human nodded, "Yes." I noticed the lack of holographic sales pitch. A few ears twitched. "The ritual permits you to select from the royal line," the Chancellor continued, each word measured. "The sovereign transcends the ritual." He glanced up at her again. She still had not spoken. Her gaze remained fixed on him, unreadable, though something faint shimmered behind it, calculation perhaps, or something less strategic. "I wasn't aware there were hidden terms and conditions," he replied. "On Earth, we usually scroll past those, but still." A ripple moved through the lower tiers, quicker this time, less restrained. The Chancellor's composure did not crack. "Your declaration disrupts succession stability matrices across 9 sectors." "Ah," he said softly, "so this is more of a software issue." Above them, the dome resumed its pulse, though slightly uneven. The energy beneath his boots flickered in shifting patterns, responding to fluctuations in the imperial neural grid. He felt it through the soles, like standing on the surface of a thinking planet. Finally, the Queen moved. It was a small motion. Her long ears angled forward, then slightly inward, as if narrowing focus. When she rose, the entire arena recalibrated. Lights dimmed instinctively, prioritizing her presence. The telepathic storm quieted, threads of violet dissolving into stillness. Her voice reached him not through air, but through his implant, translated into a tone that felt both distant and intimate. "You understand nothing of what you have done." He exhaled, "That's fair." A murmur flickered through the balconies, but she lifted one hand and the sound ceased entirely. "You were offered alliance," she continued. "Predictability, strategic equilibrium." "I know," he nodded. "They're all remarkable." "And yet you chose disruption." He hesitated only a fraction of a second. "I chose you." Her long ears shifted barely. The Chancellor interjected, tension threading his voice. "Sovereign, the bond is not symbolic. The resonance will integrate him into the imperial core. Fleet navigation, defense grids, quantum relays." I am aware, she said quietly. The words did not echo. They settled. He blinked. Wait. When you say integrate, do you mean metaphorically or? Your neural signature would be paired with mine, she replied. Emotional fluctuations would propagate through the lattice. He swallowed, so if I panic, the Empire will know. He forced a small grin. Good, no pressure. A faint, almost imperceptible curve touched her expression. It vanished quickly, but not before several courtiers' ears twitched in alarm. The Chancellor turned to him. Human envoy, reconsider. The Empire cannot hinge upon impulse. Impulse? He glanced around at the tiers of luminous nobility. You built a ceremony where a foreign species gets to choose a royal partner in front of the galaxy, and I'm the impulsive one. A pause, somewhere in the upper balcony, a suppressed burst of telepathic static betrayed amusement. The Queen descended from her elevated platform. The steps formed beneath her feet in responsive arcs of light. Each movement carried quiet authority, yet there was something else now, something less rehearsed. She stopped before him, close enough that he could see faint patterns of bioluminescent circuitry beneath her skin, pulsing gently with her heartbeat. Why, she asked, not as sovereign, not as ruler, as a question. He met her gaze. Because everyone else looked like they were trying to win something. And I was not. You weren't trying at all. A subtle shift passed through her posture. You perceive absence of pursuit as virtue. I perceive someone who's tired of being chosen for the wrong reasons. The Chancellor inhaled sharply. The energy grid beneath them flickered brighter. She studied him, her long ears adjusting minutely, calibrating to emotional frequencies only she could sense. He felt strangely exposed, as if his pulse were being translated into visible light. You believe you are different from those who sought my power, she asked. I don't want your fleets, he said simply. I don't even fully understand your fleets. Do they run on antimatter, dark energy, optimism? They run on gravitational harmonics, she replied automatically. See, he gestured lightly. That already sounds complicated. Another ripple of restrained laughter trembled through the lower tiers. She did not laugh, but her ears eased, angling outward rather than forward. You realize, she continued, that if I accept your declaration, factions will fracture. Factions always fracture, he said gently. That's what they do. Humans have entire streaming platforms dedicated to it. Her gaze sharpened slightly. Streaming platforms. Long story, very inefficient empires. For a fraction of a second, something in her composure wavered. Not weakness, but surprise at the ease with which he stood in the center of her world and refused to tremble. The Chancellor stepped closer. Sovereign, the probability models are based on precedent, she interrupted. Yes, there is no precedent. Silence fell again, though softer now. She turned her attention fully to the human. If I proceed, your species will be irrevocably linked to ours. He nodded slowly. We've been looking for connection for a long time. And if you falter, he inhaled, aware of the weight of entire star systems suspended in the answer. Then I suppose the Empire will get very familiar with human awkwardness. For the first time, unmistakably, she laughed. It was not loud. It did not echo across the dome, but it was real. Across the balconies, hundreds of long ears froze in collective disbelief. And somewhere deep within the Empire's neural lattice, a new pattern began to form. They stood alone at the center of the arena long after the court had withdrawn into urgent telepathic deliberation. The balconies were no longer crowded, yet the Empire was still listening. He could feel it now, not through sound, but through the faint vibration beneath his feet, as if the planet itself were holding its breath. You have disrupted centuries of continuity, she said quietly. I'm starting to sense that, he replied. Is there a fine community service, interstellar probation? Her long ears angled toward him, measuring. There is the resonance. Above them, the dome shifted. Lines of light converged, weaving into a lattice that descended slowly around them. The ceremonial platform awakened fully this time. Symbols flared in synchronized pulses, responding to her neural command. The High Chancellor's voice entered the arena once more, not physically but through the shared network. Sovereign, if you proceed, the human's neural architecture must synchronize with the Imperial core. I understand, she answered. He looked at her. Before we merge me with your galactic Wi-Fi, I have a question. She regarded him steadily. Speak. Are you choosing this, or are you proving something? The question lingered longer than protocol allowed. Her long ears lowered slightly, not in submission but in reflection. For my entire reign, she said, I have been selected by algorithms, by bloodline, by necessity. I have never selected for myself. And now I am considering it. He nodded once. Good, because I don't want to be your rebellion, I want to be your choice. A tremor passed through the lattice overhead. The Empire felt that. She stepped closer, so close that the faint bioluminescent currents beneath her skin flickered in rhythm with his pulse. Her long ears tilted forward, listening not to words but to the cadence of his heartbeat. You are afraid, she observed. Absolutely. You remain. I've been afraid before, he said softly. Usually I run, I'm trying something new. Something in her gaze shifted. Not calculation, not strategy, recognition. The High Chancellor's presence intensified. Sovereign, the outer sectors are destabilizing. Several houses threaten withdrawal if the resonance proceeds. She did not turn away from him. Withdrawal would fracture trade routes. Yes, defense grids would recalibrate. Yes, and yet the Empire would survive. A pause with difficulty. She exhaled slowly. Then we will survive with difficulty. The lattice descended fully, encircling them in a sphere of shifting light. Symbols ignited along its surface, forming equations that mapped emotion to energy, thought to gravity. He swallowed. If I start thinking about embarrassing memories, will that broadcast? Yes, noted. I will focus exclusively on heroic imagery. A faint smile touched her expression again. The lattice flared. Pain did not come. Instead, there was expansion. A sensation of being stretched across constellations, of hearing distant star systems hum in harmonic frequencies. He felt fleets in motion, navigation arrays adjusting by microseconds, communication relays entangled across light years. And beneath it all her presence, not overwhelming, steady. He sensed her loneliness, vast and contained for decades. He sensed the weight of decisions carried without equal, and she sensed him, uncertain, flawed, stubbornly sincere. Their pulses aligned. Across the Empire, energy grids stabilized. The destabilizing houses faltered as the Imperial core recalibrated around a new dual signature. The projected models shifted in real time, probabilities correcting themselves. The High Chancellor spoke again, voice softer now. Resonance confirmed, neural pairing stable, Imperial lattice integrated. The sphere dissolved. The dome above resumed its breathing rhythm, brighter than before. He staggered slightly, catching himself. Okay, he muttered. That was either transcendence or the galaxy's strongest espresso. You are synchronized, she said. Your emotional variance is now registered across the core. So when I'm nervous, the Empire will experience a mild tremor. He laughed weakly. We should probably invest in calming hobbies. She regarded him, her long ears now angled not in vigilance but in quiet ease. You are different. From your projections, from what I anticipated. He straightened slowly. The weight he had carried into the arena, the need to prove himself, to defy expectation for the sake of it, had shifted. It was no longer about disruption. It was about partnership. I didn't choose you to shock them, he said. I chose you because you deserved someone who sees you. And you, she asked, I deserve to stop running. The balconies began to refill as members of the court returned. Their long ears tilted in cautious curiosity. The High Chancellor approached, bowing slightly, not to her alone, but to both of them. The Empire acknowledges the bond, he declared. A wave moved outward from the arena, not telepathic turmoil this time, but something steadier. Acceptance was not instant, but it was beginning. She turned to the gathered houses. The Dominion stands unchanged in strength, she said, voice resonant, but it stands changed in heart. He glanced at her sideways. That sounded very official. I have had practice. He stepped forward beside her, no longer at the center as spectacle, but at her side as equal. He felt the lattice hum quietly within him now, not overwhelming but present, a reminder that his emotions mattered beyond himself. The outer sectors stabilized fully. Trade routes recalibrated, defense grids harmonized. The Empire did not fracture, it adapted. She leaned slightly toward him, speaking low enough that only he could hear. You realize that every argument we have will now ripple across star systems. He winced. Then I promised to keep debates about household temperature settings minimal. Her laughter was clear and unrestrained this time, carrying lightly through the arena. The court did not freeze in disbelief. They listened. And as the dome above them shimmered with renewed vitality, the human who had once stood alone at the center of a living empire no longer felt like an outsider. He felt connected, terrified still, imperfect still, but chosen and choosing in return. The queen's long ears tilted gently toward him, not scanning for threat, not measuring for weakness, simply listening. And for the first time in her reign, the silence that followed was not the silence of isolation. It was the silence of shared understanding, steady and vast as the stars themselves.